success, everything ignored. Yeah, what you living for? Feel like I'm always worth so I'm working more. Now I'm mad at God for the things I asked him for. Feel like I'm Peter reaching out in the storm. Yeah, it's crazy. Every time you call me, but I never saw it. Every time you told me just go back where you called me. How we even started? Now I'm just far away. Too worried about my problems, I ain't let God in. Yeah, it's a game changer when I speak to the son of man who got me in his hands. I don't need to pretend like I got it all together, cause he do. He will never leave you. Every day we need you.
Higher than what? 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 You is a higher than mine.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How are everybody? How are everybody? Everybody fairly well? Good. It's good to see y'all here tonight. A couple of old new faces back with us. So it's good to have all y'all here. It's good to have you here. You never know this time of the year and with everything going on how big our crowds will be. There may be some more straggling. You never know. So we'll be ready for that too. A couple of quick announcements just to make y'all, keep y'all on the front of it. Remember, 2 weeks from tonight is what? Remember what 2 weeks from tonight is? Anybody? 2 weeks from tonight, December 15th. What's it? Christmas party. Christmas party, that's right. We'll be doing ugly sweater contest. If you got you an ugly sweater you want to bring, and just have some snacks, and I'll do a short Christmas message, but we'll just have a little fun that evening and have a good time. So that is 2 weeks from tonight. Then, y'all realize 3 weeks from Saturday is Christmas? Did you realize that? 3 weeks from Saturday is Christmas? But then 4 weeks from Friday is New Year's Eve, December 31st. The end of another rough year, right? So we will have a New Year's Eve party that evening. And I know some of y'all choose to wear pajamas and things. I don't do that kind of stuff, of course, but some of y'all do. I'm a party pooper. Okay, whatever. Somebody's got to be in charge. So we'll have some of you wear pajamas and things of that nature. We are going to start about 8 o'clock, and that'll give you 4 whole hours to play some games and eat some junk and just hang out and have a good time. And then we'll watch the new year come in, be 2022. It's probably worse than this year, just so y'all know, so be prepared for that too. So that's all the real announcements we have right now. Actually, there is one more. I don't know if we got a slide on, but Winter Jam is coming. And Winter Jam, Misty, when is that again? 23rd of January. So that's about 2 months away. It's on a Sunday night. So those of you that have been to that before will probably want to go again. It's a big deal, I know. Misty and Chris always have a big time, always have a good group to go. So be preparing, thinking about that if you want to go and getting ready to do that. It'll be a long evening, I understand. And then you have school the following morning. So that'll be interesting. So that's coming too. So those are the things coming. Aside from that, does anybody have prayer requests tonight? Yes, ma'am. For JC? Lord knows she needs it, right? She needs it, I know. Needs.
I've been working on it for 3 days.
Okay. Austin? Girlfriend in the hospital, okay. Sickness, do we know what it is? Or? Don't know, okay. All right, got you. Okay, y'all may notice Brenda is not just late tonight. She's not going to be here. Just so you know, Brenda is sick, and she's normally late, but tonight she's just not going to be here. And she has kind of what I had here 2-3 weeks ago. If you remember when I couldn't talk much and had all the congestion on, she's got some kind of sinus infection and not feeling good. And she's already took the silly test, and she does not have COVID if you're worried about that, but she doesn't have that. And so anyway, so she's not feeling well. So if y'all want to pray for Brenda, do that. She would appreciate that, I'm sure. And if you don't mind me saying, you mind if I say? Okay. A surgery coming up in January. To have a rod put in his chest because of an issue he has. So we're going to pray for him too, okay, tonight. So, Austin, what else?
I remember what it is now, bronchitis.
Sir? Bronchitis? Okay.
The Patrick's and
The
they go downstairs, but they're both families.
okay. There's a lot of that going around, and we need to just pray for wellness for everybody, because there's just, this time of year there's always a lot of junk, whether it be sinuses, COVID, whatever it may be. So just pray for people, pray for your friends, pray for your families, people you know. I want to tell all of you, just go ahead and stand to your feet. I believe we're going to reverence Jesus more that way. We're going to stand to your feet, bow your heads. Let's pray. Pray for the things you've heard tonight. We get ready to go to worship and worship him for what he's going to do. Lord, thank you that you let us come here tonight. Thank you for this opportunity, God, to get to know you better, to understand you better, to draw closer to you. Lord, we just praise you for what you're going to do in all these situations. Sicknesses, people in the hospital, people with COVID, people with just general illnesses. God, surgery situations, issues in our bodies that need to be healed. And you're our healer, God. You created it all, you know it all, you control it all. We got faith that you're going to do what we need done. You're going to handle these situations the way they need to be handled. We thank you in advance for, Lord, what you're doing, that you're moving in this place. Every heart will be touched tonight. Every soul will be touched in some way. We thank you for it all in your mighty name, Jesus. Amen. Let's worship Jesus tonight.
Thank God that never fails. He won't fail me now. He won't fail me now. In the waiting, let's thank God that's never late. He's working all things out. Working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy. All my days, oh yes, I will. Thank God that never fails. He won't fail me now. He won't fail me now. In the waiting, thank God there's never late. He's working all things out. Working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy. All my days, oh yes, I will. For all my days, oh yes, I will. And I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy. All my days, oh yes, I will. For all my days, oh yes, I will. For all my days, oh yes, I will.
Bring it all to peace. Storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still call the seas to still. The rage in me to still every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear.
Thank you that we can gather here in your presence, God, and just sing these songs of praise to you, Lord. I pray that you're glorified in them. God, I pray that you'd be with us right now as we just prepare to hear from your word. God, I pray that you just open up our hearts to receive it and to understand it for your glory. We love you, Jesus, and we pray this in your holy name. Amen. Thanks for worshiping. Y'all can grab a seat.
All right. All right, gang. Again, it's good to have you here. If you remember, the past 4 weeks or so, I talked to you about being offended, about offense, right? Well, we ended that series last week. And actually, 2 weeks ago we ended out because we wasn't here last week, were we? We was out getting ready to have turkey. So we did that. But I've got just a one-night thing that I ran across, and I thought this is good. This is something that we can all relate to. And just something a little different as we're done with offended. And we'll start out by getting I want you to hear the foundation of this in Colossians 3, verse 1 and 2. We're going to start right there right now. And it is, he's coming. I surprised them. They didn't expect it that soon. Since you have been raised to new life with Christ, that's y'all, by the way. They're talking people that are new in Christ, the Christians. Set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. Now, Paul is talking to new Christians here, gang. And he's saying, set your sights on things that matter, things that last. Because all this stuff around here, as you know already, most of you have seen things, you've had things, your phone gets old, right? And it gets slow and it doesn't work when you get a new phone. Everything we have eventually wears out and breaks. It eventually falls apart, right? So he's saying the earthly things are going to go away. So don't worry about them. Think about things of heaven. Now, we tend to not do that a lot. We tend to think stuff. That's kind of society, right? And we're coming up on Christmas where we talk about a lot of stuff. I want more stuff. I need to get some new stuff, right? Don't matter if it's clothes, electronics, car, whatever it may be, parts of your car, whatever it may be, we always want stuff. But he goes on in Colossians 3:3 and says this, for you died to this life. That's because you got saved and know Jesus. And you're going to look to heavenly things, not earthly things. Okay, that's what he's saying. And your real life is hidden with Christ in God. So what I want to try to do tonight is I'm going to try to give you a tool to show you how to use this tool to grow your intimacy with God, to grow in your relationship with God, because it seems like we all need that. Seems like we all need to figure out, we struggle with that. How do we grow? How do we get closer to God? We struggle with that. And this is one we're doing. I'm going to have a little fun doing it. We're going to have a little fun doing it too. I want you to be closer to him, have more faith in him. I've tried this. I've changed a lot in the past several years because I started doing things like this more, trying to think more on the godly things, the more positive things, because I tend to be a pretty negative thinker. If you hadn't picked it up from what we talk about the news and things I say, I tend to be pretty pessimistic on things. So I've started trying to kind of shift over the past few years to think more about things that really matter and got away from the things that I always thought mattered. And the tool, gang, is called headlines. Now, headlines, first thing comes to mind is newspaper to me. I know it's not such a popular thing these days with the young people, but used to, headlines and newspaper was the big thing, right? I mean, how many of you would agree that in the past nearly 2 years now, 22 months or so, there's been a lot of headlines, a lot of negative headlines that we've all seen, right? I mean, the biggest one, of course, is COVID. I mean, obviously, right, the past 20 months, that's a lot of headlines. COVID, lockdowns, just on and on, right? And, you know, when it came out, you think back, if y'all think back, and all y'all were old enough to think back now, and when it all came out here 22 months ago, Corona, we made fun of it because it was like a beer, right? And then you said to people, I met Chloe, my younger one, she's coming here, she'd been here a while, but she normally comes. She'd say to people, did they get the Rona? Right? I mean, how many said, did somebody get the Rona? It was we thought it was kind of funny at first, right? We thought it was kind of that, and it was that headline, Corona, and that was everybody talked about. Then it got more serious. Then everything went crazy. And about March or so of 2020, they locked everything down, told everybody to stay home. First time in the history of the world, in the history of America, we're locking everything and staying home. Headlines, right? It was a big headline. And Of course, don't forget, if you hadn't forgot, the great toilet paper shortage. Right? I mean, it was a real thing. The stores didn't have it, right? It made headlines. Well, everybody's out of toilet paper. Everybody's out of the constant. We're out of things. Supply chains. It's headlines, right? Always these headlines. And now, it went along and it was like, oh, okay, well, looks like the numbers are getting better, right? What's in the headlines? Numbers are getting better. Less people are getting COVID. It's getting better. They said, we're going to beat this thing. We're going to get around it. And then all of a sudden, what's the new headline? Delta. The Delta variant. And just this week, Omicron, the new variant, right? Headlines, all these headlines about all these, it's always negative headlines, right? How many of you in your life, when you run across something, when you see something, when something happens to you, how many of you are your headlines negative? When something happens, you've always heard the old adages of, is your glass half full or half empty? Is the tank half full or half empty? Is it a stoplight or a traffic light? How do you make your headline? How do you write your headline when something happens in your life? What's your headline look like? How many of you realize that a lot of headlines aren't true? Did you know that? Did you know the media lies a lot? Did you know a lot of things sometimes they just plain mess up. And sometimes they lie just to deceive us. We've seen a lot of that over the past couple of years. I found several headlines that some are famous, and you may recognize these. I'm curious how many of you recognize some of these old headlines, because I'm going to show a few, and then some of them are just funny. I thought were just funny and kind of cool. And these are all real headlines. The first three here, go ahead, Chris. Here, look at this one. Titanic sinking, no lives lost. That was a newspaper headline, y'all. Now, I don't even know that in the Titanic, people actually died. About 1,800 died somewhere in there. A bunch of them died, right? But that was a headline. Go ahead, next one. History. Anybody here knows history? Anybody know what this is? You may relate to what this is? None of y'all know? They don't teach you this stuff in school anymore? They probably didn't. You didn't pay attention, Austin, is that what you said? Dewey defeats Truman. All of you saying, who's Dewey? That's because Dewey did not defeat Truman. It was a presidential race in 1948, I believe. I may be wrong, but it may be 40. I think it was 48. But the Chicago Daily Tribune, you'll notice the headline there, that's a major newspaper. They printed the night before because all the odds makers, everybody said Dewey's going to win in a landslide. He's going to win in a landslide. Then Harry Truman, y'all have heard of President Harry Truman? Well, he won. He beat Dewey and won the election. So they printed these newspapers, put them out, and that's Harry Truman with the newspaper, where he had just won the presidency. Next one. The Kirkpatricks did not see this article. They didn't see this story. Babies will disappear in the next 100 years except imported ones. Sociologists predict time when childbearing will become unfashionable. That was a headline. That was in the 1920s, by the way. It's 100 years ago. 1920s. That was a headline. So headlines can be false a lot of times, right? We create our own false headlines. Let's look at some of the funny ones. Go ahead, Chris. Anybody get it? Okay, next. How about this one? That's pretty accurate, right? Next. That's true. Hey, it's true. How about that for a headline? And I think 17 remain dead in morgue shooting spree. Wow. And that's the last one. Okay, that's the last one. Okay. All right. So tonight, what I want to try to do is I'm going to try to give you a tool to write your own headlines. Hopefully you'll write them better than these guys did. And I want you to remember this when it comes to writing headlines. You can't, guys, no matter what happens in your life, you can't change your circumstances. Life happens. Things will happen. Good things will happen and bad things will happen. Some of y'all have experienced bad things already in life. Most of us have experienced something bad at some time. It will happen. You can't change your circumstances. The only thing you can change is your perspective on the circumstance. And that's how you really make it in life, is by managing your perspective. How do you see things? We'll talk about that tonight. The reality is there's a lot of bad things going on in the world, right? And there's probably some bad things happening in some of your lives. Some bad things have probably happened in some of your lives. There's not much we can do about stuff going on, really not. I mean, sometimes I feel kind of helpless. I see all the crazy things happening in the society. I'm like, something that doesn't need to happen, that needs to change, but there's nothing I can do about it. I'm kind of helpless, right? The world's just kind of out of control. But we can change how we look at it and how we react to it. And you see examples of this throughout the Bible. If you read it and use some creative thinking sometimes, you can kind of see how people would have felt. I mean, think about Moses. Go back to Moses a minute. Moses sent out 2 search parties to go investigate this land they were going to go to, right? And he wanted to get the report back from his reporters, if you will. He wanted to get the headlines. What's it like over there? What's the situation? Y'all remember the story? Who remembers the story? Show me hands. Who remembers the story? A couple of you do. Good, good. So he sends them out, and he wants to know things, everything. I'm sure he probably want to know, hey, what do they farm over there? You know, what kind of farm animals they got? I mean, he probably want to know how big and tough their fighters were, how big and tough their army was. Probably need to know that. Something, I mean, do they have water? They got water for them? He probably know these things, right? So he sends them out. And when he come back, it was kind of like comparing CNN and Fox News. Totally different headlines. Same place, same people, same stuff, totally different headlines. Because people see things differently. They have different perspectives. The question becomes, what's your perspective like? Where do you get your perspective from? So one of these groups was Joshua and Caleb. And they came back with this headline. They just basically said something along the lines of, God is with us. It's the land of milk and honey, rich with blessing for all. We need to go there. This place is the bomb, right? Basically what Joshua and Caleb said. Well then, same exact place, another group of people, they come back and they say, it's full of giants. And in Numbers 13:32, it says, and they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they explored. They said things like, the land we explored devours those living in it. The land eats them. It actually devours them. And all the people we saw there are of great size. They're all giants. They're all huge. We can't go there. We'll all die. 2 entirely different reports. Same place, same land, same everything. 2 entirely different reports because they had a different perspective. I mean, their headline, if they'd put it in the paper, would have been something like, the land there eats people. So you can't change your place or your circumstances, but you can change your perspective on it. Paul's story shows a great perspective. Paul is a guy who killed 100 Christians, right? He was pretty much bad of the bad. He gets saved and goes from a Christian hater and killer to a Christian follower, a Christ follower, and wrote about 1/3 of the New Testament. He always thought the ultimate thing would be to preach in Rome, the big city. Be able to preach there and reach out to everybody. And he'd be able to preach to more people and get the word out to of Christ more. He thought it would be the ultimate thing to happen. But before he could get there to preach, he was arrested by the Romans. And he was taken to Rome. He was beat senseless. He was locked up in prison while the leadership decided, okay, do we chop his head off or not? That's what we got to decide. What are we going to do to Paul? We're going to chop his head off, or what are we going to do? And he was locked up during this time. That's about as bad as it gets, right? I mean, could it get much worse? So, I wonder what the headline would have been like if they had media like we do today. I mean, would it have said something like, the Apostle Paul imprisoned, and beheading will take place this week. Christianity is doomed. Would CNN have reported that maybe? Or would it have been more like, the Apostle Paul, wrongly imprisoned, sues the Roman government for tens of millions? I mean, what would it have been? What would the headline be, you think? Of course, then you have the analyst. You have some guys out there who want to analyze the story and be talking about why Paul got in prison and what's going to happen and what the government might do. And they'll be talking about possibilities because this is what the government did in the past to people and so forth, right? And it'd be like, maybe one of their stories would be like, 7 reasons why Christianity might end this year. Because Paul's locked up. I mean, who knows? What would the headline be, right? Guys, I want you to really learn, you may not be able to change your situation. You probably can't. You're teenagers. Most of you don't have the means to do anything to change much, right? But you can change your perspective. You can change how you see things. Change what you think about things. You got to remember what that scripture said earlier. We don't put our mind on the things of the world, but on the things God has for us in our spirit. We're not to be like the world, right? I mean, doesn't the Bible tell us that? We're to be different, to be set apart. We're to focus on things above, the things of God, not of this world. These things of this world should not matter to us. That's not easy, right? It's always easy to focus on things, of God when there's so much stuff in this world for us to look at and see. It's not, right? That's not easy. And we have to control our perspective. We have to learn to focus our perspective because nobody's going to do it for us. Matter of fact, the world would rather you focus on the world. They would rather you focus on stuff. That's what the enemy, Satan, is of the world. That's what he wants. He wants you distracted. He didn't want you paying attention to what God has for you. He wants you to miss it totally. Psychologists and counselors, when you start focusing your perspective, they have a name for it. They call it cognitive reframing. It means you're shifting your mindset to look at a situation or relationship from a positive perspective. It's not looking for what's wrong, it's looking for what's right. Now, we as people tend to be negative. We've talked about that before, right? We tend to be negative people. We tend to think about the negative in everybody and everything and say it's always a stoplight, right? It's always I got half tank, I'm almost out of gas. It's not I've got half tank, I'm over half full. It's always the worst, right? We tend to be negative in how we think. We just do naturally. See, it's not about being upset about what you don't have. It's being thankful for what you do have. And we're a lot of haves, guys. From the least of us to the most of us, we are haves. We have a lot. We've talked about that a little bit before. We have a lot. And we miss that a lot of times. We miss what we have. We don't realize, we tend to be thinking, well, I'd like to have that new iPhone 13. I'd like to have a new pair of whatever for Christmas, right? I'd like to have a new truck, but they're $110,000, right? I'd like to have a new this or that. We always want to have, I'd like to have something. Well, instead, what if we're just thankful for what we have? And I've told you guys before, I used to be one who I would buy a new truck every 3 years, period. When 3 years, I bought a new truck. Done. Just repetitively. When me and Brenda got married, new car for her every 3 years, bought a new car. It's all right, it's just a payment. Well, our perspective has totally changed on that. Because I realized, used to, my cars mattered. I had neighbors who would ask, do you do this all the time? Because I'd wash the cars like 3 times a week. I'd be waxing them and cleaning them. And I was like, well, yeah, I've got to keep them, got to take care of them, keep them cleaned up, and keep them looking like new. So when I go trade them in and get a new one, right? That was my focus. That was my thing. Not nearly so. I still care about stuff. I take care of my stuff, but that's not my focus anymore. It's changed. A counselor might tell you that when something bad happens, you can determine its meaning. As faith-filled believers, what if we let God determine the meaning instead of us? Because we tend to think negative. We tend to think the worst. We tend to think this is the worst thing ever. When 5 years down the road, a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever down the road, we look back and we're like, wow, that totally changed everything. And I can't believe I'm here now. If that hadn't happened, where would I be? What would have happened? Something totally changed that. At the time you thought was awful, but 5 years, 10 years down the road, you're like, gosh, that changed everything. I'm so glad that changed my path because I was on a bad path. I've heard people tell those stories, tell those testimonies. Now look at Paul's perspective. This guy's in prison waiting for the Romans to decide, we're going to cut your head off if they decide to do that, and they probably will. He's sitting in prison doing that. And we talked about Paul before a lot. He's in the Bible a lot. So should they cut his head off or leave him in prison? Look at Philippians 1:13. And I want you to know, this is Paul talking, and I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped to spread the good news. He didn't say, I want you to know, guys, prison stinks. I want you to know, guys, these cells, they got no running water. I got nothing. I can't take a shower. This place is awful. That's not what he said. He said it helped to spread the good news. For everyone here, he said, including the whole palace guard, knows that I'm in chains because of Christ. And because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly speak God's message without fear. They knew that about him, see, because that's all he talked about. That was his focus. That was his perspective. It wasn't, I'm in prison. Now, this is it. I wonder how much time I've got left. I'm fixing to die. They're going to kill me. I know they are. I know the Romans how they work. I'm going to die. I'm just going to sit here in the corner and I'm not even going to eat. Why bother? I'm going to die. He didn't do that. He's bragging about that everybody knows why he's there. Because he's been preaching the whole time. And because he's preached it, it's inspired other people. And now they're speaking the message without fear. Paul doesn't buy into the negative headline. He's got a different perspective. How many of us would have that perspective? Think about that a second. How many of you would have that perspective, locked in prison, knowing you're fixing to get your head chopped off because you talked about Jesus? How many of you would have that perspective? We wouldn't, right? Because we're so used to having everything so easy and so good. When something goes a little wrong, we tend to think, man, this sucks. Man, I can't believe it happened to me. Why me? I'm a good guy. Why did it happen to me? I don't deserve this, right? I wonder if he wrote his own headline, what it would say. Maybe something like, Roman plan backfires. Apostle Paul preaches to a captive audience. Because they can't get away from him, you see, he's in prison. They got to listen. He was obviously thinking, with what he said there, I've got them for 8 or 10 hours a day, each shift. They got to listen to me preach. And they can't leave no matter what I say. They got to listen. They got to hear everything I say. He had a whole different attitude than we'd say, right? You could say Paul wrote his own headline. We can do the same thing, though, gang. No matter what you're facing, no matter how bad or how sad it may be, and sometimes life ain't fair, I know that. No matter how tough, how bad it is, only you can change your perspective. Nobody else can change it for you. You've got to decide what matters most, because ultimately, that's what matters most up there. This stuff down here, it's temporary. It only lasts for a little bit. If you haven't figured it out yet, it only lasts for a little bit. I heard a good story about a man who was on the verge of giving up. His marriage was in shambles. His finances were falling apart. Felt like he hadn't had God in a long time. So he goes to his pastor, who's a friend of his. And he goes in and says, I need to talk to you. And the pastor's like, okay, well, sit down, let's talk. He said, man, pastor, he said, look, you know me a long time, and my marriage is on the rocks. Things are bad. And my job, I don't know how long I'll have my job. My job, I'm struggling there. Things are not good at work. And I've tried to pray about it, but I feel like God's just somewhere else. Like God doesn't even know who I am. I hadn't heard from God. I hadn't felt him in forever. And I don't know. I'm at the end of the road. I'm at the end of my rope. I've gone about as far as I can go. I don't even know if God exists anymore. So the pastor says, okay, I got you. So let me get this straight. Your wife has left you. She's divorced you and moved out. No, that's not, no. It's just, things are tough right now. We're having a hard time. Oh, okay, gotcha, okay. So let me get this straight. You've lost your job and you're in bankruptcy and you're losing your house. No, just things are tough at work right now. And my finances are kind of a mess because things are tough at work. It's hard right now. Oh, okay, I got you. So you've lost all faith in God and you don't believe He exists anymore. No, that's not, no. It's just, I hadn't felt Him in a while. So the pastor smiled and said, I hope you see what I'm doing. Hope you see what I'm saying. You see, it's about perspective. Because what I see here is a man who loves his wife and is ready to do something about his marriage because he knows things aren't right and he wants to make them right. And what I see here is a man who knows how to work and has provided for his family for years. And he's got a job. And he knows how to get in there and do it right and do the best he can do at it and be blessed for it. And I see a man who knows who Jesus is. And he's prayed to Him before. And he's going to do it again and seek Him out. Because he knows he needs Him right now. That's what I see. And the guy was like, wow. That's a different look. Thank you, Pastor. So you see, you can take a perspective different ways on things. You can take a perspective of, this stinks. This really is pathetic. I don't deserve this. I mean, it can mean anything. I mean, for you guys, it could be, why did I get this teacher? Why do I have to take this class? Well, what's that going to do for you in the long run? Maybe a family situation. Maybe a friend situation. Whatever it is, stop looking from the negative side and look at it as what it's going to do to you long term. Where it's going to take you long term. What headline are you going to write for yourself? That's the question. What headline are you going to write for yourself? You know, a couple things I can go to here. One, y'all all know I like to ride my side-by-side, my Wolverine, right? Well, I like to go ride. Mary's been with me. She knows I like to ride. And that was a mild ride that day. That was a mild ride. But generally when I go riding, I've got a small group of friends that we'll ride together because we kind of think the same way and enjoy the same kind of situations, terrain, if you will. And that's not riding down dirt roads. That's not what I like to do. I can drive a truck down a dirt road. I will go off in the woods somewhere and go exploring, whether it's crossing creeks, climbing sides of mountains, whatever it may be. That's what I like to do. And I don't care how rough it gets. I don't care how tough it gets. I lock in the four-wheel drive and lock front differential and just do whatever we got to do, and we'll go through it. And what I have found is several people I've invited to go riding at different times that when I ask them again, hey, you want to go riding? No, we're busy this weekend. We better not. And I said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going back over to Mill Creek right now. No, we'll pass, maybe another time. And what I've started finding out is a lot of the people who I've used to ask to ride, they don't enjoy that kind of riding. Their idea of riding is going down and riding down a dirt road. And they think that's fun. I don't think that's fun. I want some challenge. I want something a little more difficult. I want something that I may turn over or I may get stuck or whatever, that's what that's the kind of riding I like to do. And so I've only got a small group of friends who goes now. And like one of my old good buddies I used to live next door to, invite him to come, and I always tease him because he's just a big redneck, but he's fun to be around. But he went, and we got back, and he's like, hot dog, Danny, you nearly killed us out there. I can't do that kind of ride. I'm too old to do that kind of riding anymore. I can't do that anymore. And I'm like, dude, that was one of our fun trails. That's one of our more fun places to ride. We had totally different perspectives on the kind of ride it was. A couple of the guys that ride with me all the time, they're like, that was good. We get back in there, there's a good trail. And Kevin, he's like, Dude, Danny, I can't. I just can't do that kind of stuff. My rig just ain't cut out for that. I'm not. I'll just have to pass next time y'all do that. And it's totally different perspectives on things, on how we see things and how we do things. And then you get into things like Pastor Heath and I'll talk about some, and heck, Chris and me too. Sometimes we talk about things, and you start talking about things about y'all have heard me talk some about end time events and how things are lining up. And like I started talking to Brenda a couple nights ago about. They were talking about rebuilding the Cathedral of Notre Dame, right? Y'all have all heard of that burned, and it had the big issue and all. And rebuilding, now they're talking about, if you've not seen the headline, they're talking about they want to rebuild it, and they're going to set up separate rooms in it for these different segments, if you will. And they're thinking it would be a good central location for the new world church to go along with the new one world government. And if y'all hadn't heard me talk about that, that's, of course, not a real positive sign if you want to be here for a while. Because the Bible says it's going to happen one day, right? It says there's going to be a one world government, a one world church. And that's what they're talking about doing with the Cathedral of Notre Dame when they get it rebuilt now, is making it the central church for the world and having a one world religion. Well, when I start talking about those things, Brenda's like, I wish you wouldn't talk about that. That scares me. That's depressing. And to me, see, it's kind of exciting. It's like I'm thinking, okay, it's coming. It's getting closer. And I start getting more excited about it. But some people are like, I wish you wouldn't talk about that because that's kind of scary. I mean, that means we only got a few years left. We don't have a lot of time left. I'm like, I know, right? And so it's all about perspective. It is. We all have different ideas on how we see things. But we write our own headlines, guys. Our perspective is what matters here. Our perspective. How would you write your headline today? Remember, you can't always change your perspective. You can't always change your circumstance, but you can change your perspective. When you let God guide that perspective, blessings are going to follow you, okay? The devil does not define what happens in your life, and you need to learn that. The government doesn't define what happens in your life. The stories on fake news doesn't determine what happens in your life. Paul said this to relate to that in 2 Corinthians 4, 8 and 9. We're pressed on every side by troubles. Have y'all noticed that lately? All the headlines? Everything's negative. Have you seen that? Everything seems like it's out to get us. They're trying to take away our rights, charge more taxes, gas, everything's crazy high. I mean, he said, we're pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. So we get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. And that's us as Christians. Yeah, they may knock us down. They may get to us in some ways and get on our nerves, but we're not destroyed. God's got a plan for us. And he goes on in 2 Corinthians 4, 16 and 17. That's why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small, and they won't last very long, gang. All these troubles you got in high school, I think most of y'all in high school, aren't you? Everybody in high school, most even junior high, if you're in junior high. I mean, guys, it lasts just a little bit. It won't last long at all. I know it seems like it's no fun right now. It seems like things really stink sometimes, and people really are miserable sometimes. And, you know, you really wish somebody didn't even have to be in the school, right? I mean, you wish somebody wasn't there, right? But this stuff, it'll last about this long. And next thing you know, you wake up and you're as old as me. And you're like, holy cow, I barely remember school. I barely remember it. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs those troubles and will last forever. And that's the truth of it. Those troubles, they don't last very long. But we want to achieve that eternal glory that outweighs them all. Paul trusted in God's perspective because it was eternal. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't the stuff that he had there in Rome that day. It wasn't what we have right now. We can't trust in this because it's just here for a little bit. All this stuff's temporary. It's just here for a minute. So I'm going to ask you guys, are you ready to start looking at the eternal things and stop focusing on those other things for a minute? Are you? What do you think? Are you? Let's take a few minutes. We'll break up into our groups. I've got Mark here, and they could even help probably, and Chris and Misty and me, and who else we got? Oh, Mary can help too. She can help too. Mary can handle some too. We got enough people to break up in a couple of groups, and y'all want to do like we normally do? I'll let y'all decide. You want to do like we normally with, say, 10, 11, 12, and then 7, 8, 9 down below, something like that? Sound good? Somebody gets some nods with that? That's good. So we'll do that. So, let's take 7, 8, 9 to the cafe like we're normally. Y'all go in there. We'll discuss for a few minutes. Talk about our headlines. How about that? High school students stay out here. It's about an even split. We're okay. We're pretty good. Worked out okay. It don't matter. What y'all want to do? Don't matter to me. Well, y'all take them, and I guess Mark going to go with y'all in there. Let's get y'all got them, and we'll handle out here.
Okay. Just you.
Well, Nate, and yeah, we'll be all right. Landon can help me too if he wants to, or he can just watch.
All right.